Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Career Intelligence Podcast. I am your host for today, Meredith Dinitz, and I am joined by a familiar voice, Betsy Jewell. Before we jump in, I want to set the stage for this conversation because it ended up going a little deeper than we originally planned. On this podcast, as you know, we often talk about hiring trends, market shifts, and tactical career strategy. But today, we're talking about something more foundational: clarity. The kind that changes how you walk into an interview, how you evaluate your role, and how you decide what's next. As we were recording, what really stood out to me is how similar the patterns are. Whether someone is just starting out or 20 years into their career, the details look different. Internships versus leadership roles, first jobs versus restructures, but the root issue is often the same. When you don't have clarity, you second-guess yourself. When you do, you move differently. So today, we're each sharing a real client story on unpacking what was happening beneath the resume, beneath the title, and beneath the frustration. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to Career Intelligence Podcast. In today's episode, we're talking about clarity and the impact it has on the way you show up. I know normally we talk about, trends or headlines, but today Betsy and I are each going to share a real coaching moment from our work. Just as a refresh, I'm Meredith Dinitz, the founder of Your Career Happiness, and I work primarily with mid-career professionals who feel successful on paper, but are starting to question what's next. And my work focuses on helping them get clarity before they make a move, whether that's, navigating a job search, thinking through what's next for them, or getting back to the work that actually energizes them. And what I love about our conversation today is that even though I focus on mid-career and Betsy works with early career professionals, you're going to notice that the themes are surprisingly similar. We were supposed to have Kathleen with us today, but unfortunately she is stuck in almost 4 feet of snow. So we are hoping she is staying warm.
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine.
Me either. And for all of our listeners that also have been experiencing this, we hope you are staying safe and warm as well. So we're each going to share a real client moment and then really talk about what was actually going on beneath the surface, and then what listeners can take from our conversation. Betsy, do you want to kick us off?
Sure will. Thanks, Meredith. I'm excited to be here today. Wish Kathleen was with us, but Mother Nature had other plans for her. So yeah, speaking of clarity, the story I'm going to share today is actually about a client I had recently who was a recent graduate from college and is getting ready to go on to her master's, but in the meantime needed an internship. She'd been applying and applying and applying for so many internships since probably September. And it wasn't until January when she finally got an interview, and she was super excited about it. She went on the interview, or it was actually virtual, and she did the interview, and then she called me afterward and she said, I think I bombed it. And I said, everybody always says that. Everybody struggles with confidence and feels like it didn't go well. And she said to me, no, it really didn't go well. Which, interviewing is one of those things, the more practice you get, the better you get at it, right? And the other thing is, interviews aren't about sounding impressive. They're about sending clear signals of readiness. You want whoever you're speaking to, whether it's the recruiter or the hiring manager, the goal is when they listen to you and talk to you, they say in their own mind, this person is ready for this, or this person would be good for this, or this person is the right fit. I think a lot of people feel like they have to come up with these super fancy answers and use big words. And it's so not about that. It's so much about authenticity, who you are, and the value that you bring. So let's start with the problem. The problem was this young woman, let's just call her Marsha. Marsha. Pulled that out of thin air. Let's call her Marsha. She had very strong grades. She graduated with a very high GPA. She had experience during college. She had part-time jobs on campus. She had done some jobs on the side outside of school, and she had great experience. She was a leader of a club. It wasn't like she wasn't prepared. I think the biggest problem was she didn't know how to articulate who she was and the value that she brought. So again, she kept getting interviews but wasn't getting offers. We started talking about what it was going on in the interviews and what she could be doing differently. And it sounded more like she was just kind of Googling questions and memorizing some answers and practicing some STAR stories, right? Situation, task, action, result. But she wasn't really preparing strategically. So interview prep, again, it's not about memorization. It's about recognizing what they're looking for and positioning yourself as the right person for the role. Yeah. My first tip would be, when you're preparing for an interview, study the job like it's your final exam. You want to know everything you can about the job and the company, right? Take the job description. If you're one of those people who likes to print things out and highlight and make notes in the margins, have at it. If you'd rather do it online, open a Google Doc and just start typing notes in. But you want to make sure that you clearly understand the role and what they're looking for. What are the required skills? What's the language or the terms and phrases they use over and over again? And look for those sort of, I don't want to say hidden, but there's like implied competencies. Right? They're asking for this, so that must mean they also want this kind of thing. So find 3 themes from the job description and focus on those. Some examples might be, data fluency or client communication or cross-functional collaboration, like you're going to collaborate with other teams. The job description literally has the key to what you need to know. But I would take it again one step further and say, learn all you can about the company. Go to their website, read their mission statement and their vision. Look at how their departments are structured. Look at what the promises they make to their customers or their clients, depending on who they serve. Understand who they are and what problems they have to solve. Because in hiring you, you are there to solve a problem. When we think about telling your stories, or if they ask you questions like, tell me about a time when, a lot of people use the STAR format, STAR, situation, task, action, result. And I like that format a lot, mostly because, if I'm being honest, it helps people not go off on a tangent and babble. Do you see that too, Meredith?
100%. The similarities, no matter the age or stage.
Yes. So you want to make sure that you're clear and concise. You want to answer the question, but you don't want to go off on, like I said, tangents or spend a lot of time on something that's not relevant. But the thing about STAR that I always coach my clients is, don't forget the L on the end. And I know there's no L on the end of STAR, but what did you learn? Particularly when you're a college student or a recent grad, learning, absorbing, ability to learn, excitement for learning, curiosity is a skill that is so desired. So make sure that you tap into that. Do you talk about that with your clients too, Meredith?
Yeah, things actually, I love what you said about trying not to ramble. Analogy I like to use with my clients is paint that picture and then stop. There's that fine line. So absolutely that. And then instead of the L for what did you learn, because obviously that's more appropriate with your clients, I try to tell them it's like a T, tie it back to the company. Why does it make sense to them? Show them how you can help solve that pain point and that you understand this is the value you could bring for their role.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that T. That's a good one. So again, you want to prepare stories. You don't want to sound scripted and like you're reading off bullets. You really want to communicate, again, how you handled it, what it felt like, your thought process, how you went through, how you solved the problem or achieved the goal or whatever the question might have been. Yeah. So next, you want to translate experience to match the role, right? When they ask you, this is a great example. So the first question you usually get asked, or one of the first, is, tell me about yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, I like to do jigsaw puzzles and I walk my dog every day, but they don't really want to know that, nor do they care, right? When you think about the tell me about yourself question, it should include things that are actually directly related to the job, right? So if you're going for a job that, let's just say it's for computer analyst, it's got a very technical role, and they say, tell me about yourself. Well, the kinds of things you're going to want to include are maybe if you're going for an internship, maybe some of the courses that you've had in computer science. If you're going for a job after school, maybe some of the projects you worked on, the teams you were part of, the problems you solved as it relates to the company. If it's a job, in healthcare, you want to, if you happen to have experience working on something in a healthcare field, absolutely you want to include that. Any thoughts to add to that, Meredith?
Yeah. Well, and again, obviously different demographics, because I think everything you said is so important. You don't want to give the history lesson. They're not asking you to walk them through your resume. They want to understand who you are, what you've done, that value at that high level and why you make sense. So exactly to your point, just from a little bit of a different angle. I think that's a really important point.
Yeah. All good points. I like that history lesson. It's a good example. Okay, so let's talk about practicing. Before you get started doing and I do mock interviews with my clients too, but there's a lot that you can do on your own if you're not yet working with a coach or have decided not to. Mm-hmm. First of all, again, you want to be prepared before you do the mock interviews. And here's what I'm going to say. AI is your best friend. Mm-hmm. When it comes to research and preparation and getting ready for an interview, ChatGPT will give you so much information you never even thought about and more. Let's just start with that. Again, take the job description, paste it into a ChatGPT session, copy your resume, not including your name and your contact information, all that, just the bulk of, your experience, your skills, where you went to school, paste that into ChatGPT, add a link to the company that you're interviewing for, add any other supporting evidence, right? Like if you have a project, if you have a portfolio, anything else that will tie to your ability to do the job. Put that all in and give it a prompt like this. I'm getting ready to interview for this job at this company. I have shared my resume. Please help me prepare for the interview. Again, you can say, please give me questions that I might be asked during this interview. Please help me craft answers that are relevant to this position specifically. And please give me some suggestions for smart questions that I can ask in the interview. Because that's actually a part that a lot of people, I think, they don't really put a lot of information or thought into. So when they get into the interview, the interviewer will say, do you have any questions for me? And a lot of people are left scratching their head going, no, thanks, I'm all good, which never, ever, ever do that. Always ask something. But more importantly, be ready with smart, informed questions that show you did your homework, you know what you're talking about, and you're ready to work for them.
To take it one step further, Betsy, you could also, tell them to also put the title of the person you're speaking with, because then maybe ChatGPT can even make it a little bit more targeted to that person's role.
Excellent suggestion. Because good point. You don't know if you're interviewing with a recruiter, it's a very different conversation than when you're interviewing with the hiring manager. Mm-hmm. And that's a very different conversation when maybe you're in the second or third interview and it's somebody up the chain, like maybe a vice president or a senior level director or somebody like that. So Great addition. Thanks, Meredith.
Yeah.
Once you put that all in, you are going to get a plethora of information. You're going to get all kinds of tips, and it might be a little bit overwhelming at first. So all I usually say to people is start with one thing at a time. So first things first. And you can keep regenerating more questions and asking more questions to ChatGPT. Start with, first of all, I'm preparing my tell me about yourself answer. What are the things I should focus on? Like you can go step by step. It doesn't have to be everything all at once. And then after you do that, you can start asking specific questions about like, which of my skills are most important to this role? And then you'll know which ones to focus on and build stories around, because you want to have those stories in your pocket for when they ask you the question about, tell me about a time when, or let me hear about a project you worked on, or all the other things that they could be asking you.
I think one other thing to add to that, and we touched this, but just to reiterate, think about if there was a project at school or an internship that are most in line with how you could tie it back to the company and to that role.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, project work is good work.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you the opportunity to demonstrate your skills. And as I talked about in a recent episode, proof of work. Like anybody can sit in an interview and say, I know Excel or I know how to code in Python, but prove it to me in an interview. Tell me about a project where you used that. Tell me about how you used it. What made you choose that if it wasn't, if you had options? Think about your thought process and how you applied that. Because at the end of the day, and we're seeing this more and more, we hear this from recruiters and hiring managers all the time. The human skills have never been more important, particularly with AI joining the party, whether we like it or not. You want to be able to focus on those skills that AI can't deliver. The communication, the collaboration, the critical thinking, all of the problem solving. I mean, it can solve problems, but only if you tell it the problem and tell it how to solve it. It's not going to come up with that on its own. So again, I think it's really important to remember that the human piece of it is very important. And interviews are people interviewing people. At the end of the day, it's people hiring people. You want to make sure that you're human and not just, again, rattling off a list of skills or experience.
Yeah, I love that. It's like that human interaction, it matters so much. They want to make sure that you can do the work, but they also want to know that you're a good fit for the team, right? And the company and the mission. And so you want to let them see that human side. And it can be intimidating and overwhelming, but I think all of the amazing points you're sharing about how to prepare helps that confidence and really gives that clarity so that you can walk in or get on that Zoom and feel ready to just knock it out of the park.
Yeah. And circling back to Marsha. So we spent some time doing all these things. I mean, AI helped, but we did a lot of one-on-one. I asked her questions. She answered them. She asked me questions that might be smart questions to ask in the interview. I would say one of the most important things she took away from our time together was confidence, because I think she was very nervous. In fact, I know she was very nervous. She told me she was. She struggled a little bit with her answers. She tripped over her words a little bit. But by the time we were done working together, she knew what she knew. She had her answers ready. She had her questions ready. She didn't have to think about it. She didn't have to read from a paper. She felt completely confident. She went into her last interview, which was a second interview, and got the internship. So the moral of the story is clarity comes from preparedness and confidence comes from preparedness. Both of those things can get you to your goal.
Yeah, I love that. So what do you think specifically changed in the way she showed up in that final interview? I mean, I know you said the confidence, but anything else?
I think a lot of it was confidence, but I think the other part of it was she had never really detailed out the answers to the questions before. She kind of knew, but she really knew. I mean, smart young woman, hardworking, but just didn't understand because no one had taught her, right? Let's talk about that, right? Especially in higher ed. Students aren't getting prepped for this kind of stuff, especially not in depth. And I think she just didn't know what she needed to do. And once we walked through it, again, I think the confidence was a big part of it. But I think the other part of it was she had thought through her answers so much more. So she did get that clarity that she needed.
Yeah, I'm sure you see that a lot with your clients.
For sure. For sure.
This challenge. Well, sounds like it was a very successful story, and I'm glad to hear that she got that internship. It sounds like it was well-deserved.
Oh, yeah. And she's super excited about it. So I'm happy for her.
Well, that's a win. That's fantastic.
Okay, let's hear from you, Meredith. Let's hear your story.
Right. So I had a client, mid-career leader, almost 20 years of experience in professional services in a regulated industry. Very capable, very respected, good subject matter expert. And this client had recently been promoted to a manager role and was over the moon about that. And I think what really energized them, it wasn't so much like the technical work. It was more about that this client loved mentoring their team, developing people, and just watching others grow around them. And then, of course, like what's been going on in this market, the company restructured and they basically took the leadership title away and moved them back into an individual contributor role. And I think the hardest part was that this client was still doing a lot of the same manager level work, still supporting a team, still handling escalations, guiding projects. The responsibility didn't go away, but the recognition did. And that just threw this person, it was really hard. And it's understandable, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so when they came to me, they were saying, look, I don't know if I'm burnt out or if I just can't get past this whole losing my title and just being in the same situation. And at first it sounded a little bit like boredom, but with the way they were describing their work to me, it was more like Groundhog Day. It was the same conversations, the same projects, heavy travel, billable hours, young kids at home, lots going on. And as we talked more, it became clear that it wasn't just about burnout. They just didn't feel valued in the same way anymore. That was the biggest challenge. And for this person, losing that title was like losing part of how they defined their impact. And that's hard, especially in this, demographic and how hard they've worked. And so when that title disappeared, it felt like they've lost their influence and their ability to really move the needle. They came to me and just wasn't sure what to do next. And instead of jumping into, let's look at the LinkedIn and the resume, I'm like, no. We just kind of took a step back. We had to really kind of unpack what that title represented for them and what part of that was about, being seen and recognized and what part was about, the kind of impact that they actually wanted next. So there was a lot going on. And so when we spent a little bit of time and looked at like their peak moments, one story really stood out to me. They had described leading an offsite with their team where they got to teach and they loved solving these complex problems in real time and, watching these light bulb moments happen with their team and being trusted to run the room, all the things, that they were doing before. That was really when the pattern became clear. It wasn't just about having manager in their title. It was about more of that influence, that growth, being trusted and being seen. It all was wrapped up together. And so once we were able to get clear on what mattered most, their conversations shifted. And so through those, they were more focused on who they were talking with. They transitioned into what mattered most, which I ultimately ended up being more of like a mission-driven organizational role that aligned with systems level impact. That was really important to them. So they were still able to be strategic, still solved those complex problems, but it was much more aligned with their values and where they were in their life.
I love that you're talking about this because this is a big subject that I cover with my clients too. Like, what matters to you?
Right.
Even when you're early career or any phase of your career, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? What are your deal breakers, right? Talking about deal breakers, that can be a deal breaker if you're not getting the fulfillment or the purpose or whatever that is out of your job. So I'm glad that you talked about that.
Yeah. And I would think probably for your clients, especially when they're first starting out, it's alignment with that right manager and that right team and who's going to help, give them that mentorship and support, but also allow them to just run with it when they can. So yeah, that's why I think at any level, it just might have a little bit of a different spin, right? And so with this client, I think the biggest shift wasn't just the job. It was choosing a role where their impact was real and recognized. And so I think what's important is if you're feeling stuck right now, before you change everything, get clear on what you actually want to keep. Burnout isn't always about capability. Sometimes it's about that misalignment. It's hard when we're doing it alone or when we're kind of in our own way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people will leave a job because exactly what you're talking about, it's not a good alignment for them or not a good fit for them. And they'll go to another job, but they haven't really thought through, why was that not a good fit for me? Why was I not aligned? And they might make the same mistake again because you're right. They're not looking at the right things that were the reason they left in the first place. But so what advice do you have for people when you think about that? If you're getting ready to leave a job, what's the first step in figuring out alignment?
before you leave that job, if you are still in one, I think it is to take that step back and do a little bit of the, for lack of a better word, the soul searching, or these little exercises to get that clarity. And I know that seems to be our word of the day, but like, to your point, right? What are the things that you have loved about where you are? What would you love to leave behind? Like, I will sometimes do like journaling exercises where, share a couple of examples of like stories of when you've been the most engaged, who was around you, what were you doing? If you could do something for free and you never had to get paid. I mean, again, not that that's a realistic, but just to get some themes, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's start uncovering where those themes are.
Good. That's great. I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups, and there's a lot of conversation, particularly with empty nesters. So the kids have flown the coop, and some parents have been working throughout, some haven't, and they're looking at returning to work. And the question always comes up, I want to do something that's purposeful, that I feel good about, right? So that's really great advice for people who maybe haven't even been in the workforce for a while and are looking to restart or re-enter. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, think about what are some skills that you have really enjoyed using. Even if you were a stay-at-home parent, were you involved in the PTA? Did you volunteer? Like things that you have done along that journey while your kids were growing up. There are impactful things in there that can be transferable. It's just a matter of identifying. So whether you might be in that phase, or you've been unfortunately part of a reorg, or you're just sitting there not happy, but you're working, these are just some things to think about before you make any moves or changes.
Okay. Great. Great advice.
Yeah. Well, I just think there's a lot of similarities for sure with both of our.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to go back to that word again, but
Right.
clarity is such a game changer for all parts of your career. Knowing yourself, which I always start with, the self-discovery piece is so important. Knowing what the options are, so like the career exploration piece. And where those two align and fit together, that's the zone of genius, right? That's the place you want to be because it feels good. It feels right to you and you're a good fit for it. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been great. Yeah, you just said this, so not to totally repeat, but what does stand out in both of these stories is that clarity really does change how you show up, right? Whether your early career, that clarity may come from preparing well enough for Marcia, confidently articulate your value. For mid-career, it might come from getting honest about what actually motivates you. But in both cases, again, like you said, right, once that clarity is there, the confidence tends to follow, and then the better outcomes.
Exactly.
Yeah. If today's conversation resonated, please take a moment before making your next move, right? Ask yourself where you might need more clarity in how you present yourself or in what you actually want. And we'd love to hear from you if there are questions you'd like to us to tackle, or topics you want us to explore in future episodes. Feel free to reach out, leave us a comment, and you'll find all of our contact information in the notes as well. Betsy, thank you so much. Kathleen, we missed you. We hope you're staying warm, but really enjoyed this conversation. Betsy shared so many great pieces of information, and we look forward to seeing everyone again on a future episode.
Yep. Thanks for being here. This was great.
Thanks. Have a good afternoon. As we wrap up today, one thing stands out. Clarity changes everything. For Betsy's client, clarity came from preparation, understanding how to articulate value and show up confidently in an interview. For mine, it came from stepping back and redefining what impact and recognition really meant. Different stages, same principle. So before you make your next move, pause and ask yourself, where do I need more clarity right now? Is it in how I present myself or in what I actually want next? If this conversation resonated, we'd love for you to share it with someone who might find it helpful. You can find all of our episodes, show notes, resources, and ways to connect with us at careerintelligencepodcast.com. Betsy helps early career professionals and career pivoters clarify their story and confidently communicate their value. And I work with mid-career professionals who are ready to gain clarity before making their next strategic move. Please take a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And we genuinely welcome your feedback, questions, topic ideas, or career challenges you'd love to hear us discuss. You can reach out to us through the website or connect with us on LinkedIn. To everyone listening, thank you for spending your time with us. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Career Intelligence Podcast.